Hello ladies and gentlemen, my name is Dan, the voice behind that Kaito Dan, and welcome one and all to the first episode review for a brand new RWBY volume with Volume 8, Episode 1, Divide. Oh, it is good to be back doing one of these, and what an episode to discuss. But before we go any further, if you want my thoughts on the new opening, you can check out the analysis video that I did for it recently, which I'll leave in the card above and the description down below. Also, don't forget I will be having some of your comments featured in these episode reviews, so be sure to leave your thoughts on the episode or anything I discuss in the comments down below, and tune in next week to see if they get featured. I'm also thinking of showcasing some fan art during these segments too, as a way to raise awareness on the many talented artists out there, especially when the recent Twitter changes and folks stealing art has made it tougher on the artist community as of late. So if you've made some killer art for this volume, or know someone who has, bring it to my attention on Twitter with the correct details, and let's make these viewer segments even more fun. So, here we are, back at it again with the newest chapter of the ongoing adventures of Team RWBY and company, following the kickoff to the Atlas arc that had stuff like risky secret keeping, behind the scenes scheming, thirsty moms, romantic highs, crushing lows, aggressive bullet points, and a whole lot of snow. Basically, a lot of shit went down last time out, and the drama is only gonna grow more intense with the three-way battle between the heroes, Ironwood's forces, and Salem's lot, set to clash in the Frozen Kingdom. After months of speculation, panicking, and the general nonsense that is the year 2020, the question we must now ask is, was Volume 8's premiere able to carry on from the promising form of the previous volume? Or was it a bittersweet return to the bitter cold north? Let's find out! So what's the first big note this volume wanted to set the pace with? Well, how about throwing us a crumb for something we've desperately wanted for some time now? Cinders Past, as the episode opens with a dim spotlight over a younger Cinder scrubbing the floor, much like her inspiration did before her happily ever after. This was a pretty exciting way to start things off, as Cinder's backstory, the motivation behind her lust for power, has been a big missing piece of her character for so long. And sure, it's a brief moment, but it's at least something for now, doing enough to confirm the most common theory that Cinder started out low on the food chain, much like Cinderella herself, with maybe a suggestion that Cinder's depression during this time took her to a rather dark place, if those binds on her wrist are anything to go on. As the first shot of the volume, it immediately sets up the strong likelihood that we're gonna learn more about Cinder across what should be a big volume for the Vixen. As for present day Cinder, she and Neo are heading into the Grim Swarm, where we see old Richard the Whale also works part-time as a flying fortress / airport, complete with landing bay. A little bit odd, yeah, but hey, I guess it beats going in through the blowhole. Also, I like the cold open here with the ominous music and chanting, the shots of the Grim flying all over the place, and the intro credits appearing slowly over shots of the whale's gross insides. Nice way to carry on from the dark tone the last volume left us off on. Of course, this is also Neo's first time dealing with such unique settings. As we can see, she's rather taken aback by it as well, probably wondering if it's too late to go back to Vale or see what's up in Vacuo. I hear it's quite nice right now. But she's here now and gets introduced to the Wicked Witch herself, Salem, who makes it clear that while she does trust Cinder as her maiden host, she best not have come back empty-handed, following her failures in Haven. Luckily for Cinder, she does come bearing the Lamp of Knowledge, which she takes full credit for reclaiming, much to Neo's annoyance. Sure, Cinder, just keep on poking that bear. I'm sure Neo hasn't ruled out sticking her weapon down that lion mouth of yours just yet. Then Tyrion makes his presence known too, making light of both Cinder and Ironwood's intelligence. Clearly, the mad lad relishing in being able to mock Cinder to her face once more. And I won't lie, I did kinda miss the banter myself, especially now that Cinder can bite back, highlighting how Tyrion and Watts both got tricked by the same man that Tyrion claims isn't all that sharp. Though we also hear Tyrion accept Watts' defeat as just another necessary sacrifice, suggesting then that the villains think he's dead and most likely won't be considering a rescue effort. I wonder then if Ironwood may use that to his advantage, to then try and convince Watts to side with him. That way he gets a new pawn that can fill in for Pietro on the tech front, while Watts gets to be what he wanted to be, the top tech dog in the kingdom, even if it's still while under James's boot. But when one door closes, another can open, as Neo gets introduced to everyone as, in Cinder's own words, a valuable asset, prompting another surprised reaction from Neo. It's quite cheeky of Cinder to treat her as just another tool, considering she was getting her butt soundly whipped by Neo in their Volume 6 clash. And again, surely Neo's starting to regret her choice now. Yeah, working with Cinder meant that she has found where RWBY is, the other person she wants payback on for Roman's death, but ever since giving Cinder the lamp, it's becoming increasingly more obvious to Neo that what she believed could have been a mutual partnership, much like her time with Roman, is actually becoming more of a master-lackey deal, and those alongside Cinder are the type that would happily see Neo as another necessary sacrifice if their plans required it. It's gonna be interesting to see how long Neo's willingness to comply will last before she considers getting out while she can, if she can. Though, if she does try and take out Cinder, I'd also like to see her fight with Tyrion too. Talk about a dream match. Oh, and on the topic of people viewed as assets, we find out that the trio of Emerald, Mercury, and Hazel are also here, and to celebrate being called off the bench, they're rocking some new threads for the colder climate. Mercury having a full jacket and new bottoms, complete with zips to reach his prosthetics, while Emerald looks like she took pages from Coco and adopted a bit more style to her look, with the trendy white jacket, longer bottoms, and new accessories. Hazel though has easily the biggest changes to his look, with some armored gloves, his hair slicked back, and a new open-sided top that shows off his insane torso muscles. Good god, you can grind diamonds on those things. Honestly, I quite like these new looks. My only real gripe being preferring Hazel's old hairstyle, as the slick back look doesn't quite mesh as well at the moment with him being this wild beast in combat. Everything else though is solid. Nothing too drastically different, but enough to fit the cold weather, and in general, it's good to see them all utilized again. Their presence also making for quite the statement that Salem's intentions are big by having all her major pieces alongside her. Of course, this is also the first time Emerald and Mercury have seen Cinder since believing she died in Haven, and as expected, Emerald is over the moon. Mercury not so much. Though Cinder does swiftly holds Emerald's joy, and considering how last time we saw these lot, Mercury did try to make Emerald realize Cinder only saw them as tools, not anything close to what Emerald has hoped, it's not just Neo's response now to Cinder's actions that I'm eager to see develop over the volume. After some more mocking from Tyrion, Cinder commits to reclaiming the Winter Maiden powers from Penny, now she can plan specifically with her in mind, but Salem interjects, as she has given no such order yet. Cinder may be her maiden vassal, but she is still a pawn that must follow Salem's will above her own aspirations, much to her dismay. And as we see how Salem can control the Whale Grim through her chair to show Atlas in the distance, she makes sure that Cinder does remember her place now she's back in Salem's good books. Feels like they're really planting the seeds for Cinder to possibly go rogue, even though she does submit at this point. With that tease of her past, it's more clear than ever before that Cinder deep down hates being subservient to anyone. She'd rather be free to act on her own will than serve others, only doing so to get the means to be stronger. Plus, she already did go against Salem's will once before in trying to kill RWBY, so it's not unheard of for Cinder to focus on herself over her queen. And I'm curious to see what may happen the next time she tries to follow her own aspirations, especially considering Salem's past warning about what will happen if such actions interfere with her plans. Nonetheless, this is quite the villain lineup here, and there's a lot of intrigue as to what their next plans will be. Who will be hunting down Penny? Who will try and cause more strife for the people of Atlas? So many dangerous individuals and so many reasons to be nervous. And much like how Volume 4 started off by carrying on from Volume 3's dread-filled climax, we got a very good early understanding that these lot are prime and ready to cause further harm to the kingdom and to the heroes. After that, we jump to the slums, where many faunists seem to live when they're not forced to work in the dust mines, and one particular faunist, who I'm referring to affectionately as Hans, a mole man, has a rare example of full animal hands. That's actually pretty cool, and I hope we see more examples of that in the future. Oh, and he's also feeding Oscar, who's bunkered up here since his swan dive off of Atlas, though it's not long until he gets picked up by RWBY and company. It's here that we get to check in on the current state of Mantle, and it's not looking so hot, literally. The streets are filled with either grim or people without homes trying to keep warm. Keep in mind, the cold of Solitas can kill you in a matter of hours, and with no heating grid and no support from the military, it's not looking good for those unable to find a decent means of heat and protection. Worrying times indeed, and it doesn't help Oscar's mood as he starts to think himself foolish for hoping that Ironwood would come to his senses. But at least RWBY can give him some comfort, knowing those feelings of regret and frustrations all too well, I'm sure. Also, don't think I didn't catch that blush, Crewbie. Anyway, the heroes have been bunkering up with the Robinless Happy Huntresses, who are stepping up where the military has fallen, and even the Aesops as well, given they've tried to help out the citizens even without their leader. And we get this sweet little subversion to the Nora gomping Oscar gag, this time the ginger snap giving the lad a much needed softer embrace. After a bit of a rough patch in the past, it's nice to see that everyone here was worried about Oscar, and they are glad he's okay. Though, of course, there is still one big absentee still missing: Crow. Last these lot heard, he was with Robin, and since then, nothing. They don't know he's arrested, and you get the feeling that it might be a while until we see him and Robin back with the main group, so the others are just gonna have to step it up without his support until then. What's interesting though is Oscar doesn't bring up that Ozpin is back. Instead, he lets Oz know within his own head for the first time as well that he wants to talk to him later before they start to reveal his return. Possibly he's gonna try and chastise him for running away from his mistakes in an effort to help him try and redeem himself at long last. At least that's what I'm thinking. Joanna then chimes in saying that the gang need to help out because the clock is ticking. They need to get everyone into the crater under Atlas, even though it's not the safest place in the world because it's much warmer right now than what will happen when nightfall comes in, and it'll be easier to protect everyone in one place. Gotta feel bad for these lot though, as Weiss kinda highlights with the most fitting line to represent the mood of this year. These guys have been going full throttle since the party at the Schnee Manor. Since then, they fought off Grimm, got shaken up by Salem's appearance, lost the unity with Ironwood, fought the Aesops, Neo, and Cinder, and had to flee without any time to properly rest. And now they gotta get right back into the thick of things, and considering we know the events of this volume are set to take place over 2 days, I hope they have some good stamina. Now, before we go any further, I just have one question to ask. Who are you? Who? Seriously, who are these two that's often seen slap bang in the middle of the shot? Obviously, this is an abandoned bar, complete with several beer posters. I wonder if this one is Professor Rumpel's favourite. So, they could be the former owners of this place. But if this has also been the main base for the Happy Huntresses, at least for now, could they also be tied to the group in some way? Heck, the one with the eye patch kinda has a similar skin tone to Robin, so maybe she's related to her. One theory that I've seen floating around at the moment is she's Robin's sister, and to jump on from that, I wonder if she could have been the original leader of the group or at least a key figure, thus the ties to her bar. And what if she died at some point, and in turn, that gave Robin further reason to leave the academy and take over where her sister left off? It would be a nice way to utilize how Robin Hood in some versions of his legend was a noble, but became an outlaw when those in power like him betrayed him. In this instance, Robin feeling betrayed by those in power who allowed people like her sister to risk her life in helping the city, where folks like Ironwood and the council have failed. Back on track, Yang's the first to commit helping out the evacuations, but RWBY also wants to discuss what to do next about the rest of the world, since Salem obviously won't stop at just Atlas now she's out in the open, prompting her to ask Pietro if it's possible that Amity Tower can still be used to send out a warning and call for help. Seems like it can actually work according to the Doctor, since most of the construction and fueling has already been done and they can easily manage it if they can get up there. But they'll need to break into either Ironwood's office or the main military base under Atlas to access the only terminals that can greenlight the launch. Simple, this is not. As such, Yang immediately brushes aside the idea, only for RWBY to press the matter further, prompting some raised concerns about RWBY's decision making as of late, openly doubting her leadership, and judging by some of the reactions from the rest of the gang, Yang's feelings might not be the only ones being shared. Now, yes, this is quite harsh, especially with it coming from RWBY's sister of all people, but it did need to be said. They all took RWBY's gamble and it didn't work out, so there's fair grounds to be hesitant the next time RWBY had another risky move in mind. Perhaps worried that her youthful optimism and focus on the bigger picture is blinding her from truly understanding the consequences if things go south again. It's reasonable feelings to have, and the current situation does call for wider group discussions about their next plan, rather than just going with another in-the-moment choice made by one person. Plus, I'm glad we're getting this kind of discussion so soon after the fallout, because one, it gives more room to explore all the emotions and opinions when they're fresh on everyone's mind, and two, it gives us the whole volume to explore RWBY's response and the wider scope of how her previous choice has made things tougher moving forward. But at the same time, RWBY is still right to think about the rest of the world, and to not completely dismiss another way to get the tower working. She just needs to fully come to terms with the full extent of her choices, and learn how to be a leader that doesn't just lead by her heart, but also with a clear head that has thought about the risks, not just the reward. It's worth noting as well that we don't hear everything that Yang wants to say, as she gets cut off midway through, and that could have taken some of the sting off her comments and show that Yang does still trust RWBY, she just wants to help her improve. But we're gonna have to wait and see how RWBY does realize perhaps where she must improve if she's going to be a leader that can light the way forward and have that maturity to understand where things can go wrong. The divide on what to do next then begins to grow as Ren backs Yang while Nora sides with RWBY, carrying on from last volume and showing that this inseparable duo is not really on the same page right now. Though, much like RWBY and Yang, their thought process is understandable too. While Nora was quite vocal in the past about helping the already suffering people of Mantle not face further sacrifices, that concern has stretched out to everyone across the world that is suffering as well, and they're not ready for something like Salem. So if getting the tower can give humanity the chance to survive this, then Nora will put her trust in its success. As for Ren, he's once again banking on what he feels confident can make a difference in the here and now. The same feelings he had last volume that made him trust in Ironwood as something stable amongst his fears of the unknown regarding Salem. If the visuals in the intro are anything to go on, we're going to be seeing even more exploration of these two being on completely different ends of the matter, which I'm all for, because it has led to some good drama between them, and it's a bigger test of their relationship than just waiting for one of them to be open about their feelings. And with Jean suggesting that they have a compromise and split both groups into two goals, we're gonna see how they handle matters without that constant supporting element to their character. How will either of them focus on the mission while still fretting about the other? How will they react when they hopefully reunite safe and sound, or if they reunite with some damages and wounds? The time apart will surely shine a light on what their relationship truly means to them, and give the pair new challenges that I am all for. So I am cool to see more of them acting on their own thoughts and feelings, even if it means they're not by the other side for a small period of time. But yeah, Jean does manage to avoid the group wasting time running around in circles over what to do, and instead suggests killing two birds with one stone. And Oscar manages to calm some of RWBY's fears a little bit about the group being divided, since they are still going to be united in helping those in need, and finding a way to at least warn about Salem. It's here we also hear for the first time from Penny, the Robo Girl being understandably quiet with a lot on her mind right now post becoming the Winter Maiden. She wonders about going back to Atlas and maybe getting the Staff of Creation to give to Salem in the hopes that she'll spare the kingdom. A rather earnest idea, with Penny still thinking about the people she swore to keep safe as their protector in mind, but also maybe those big changes and stress on her mind is making her think of this rather foolish idea, since 1. There's no way Salem would comply, 2. No way Salem can get the relic without Atlas falling onto Mantle, and 3. No way Ironwood would allow Penny to get even close to the relic without making her submit, by will or by force. Definitely feels like we're going to see Penny dealing with a lot of stress over the changes in her old life to now. She was the protector of Mantle, and that clearly meant so much to her, but she also was trying to also understand more about being a normal girl, and now all of that has been tossed aside with such an important power and burden thrusted upon her, becoming far more than any normal girl could have ever dreamt of being. And her naive idea here is perhaps her first sign of starting to crack a little under that stress, the conflicting emotions within her perhaps making her consider something so dangerous that in the end it might cause some further problems. She's also not willing to let her being a target in the enemy's eyesight stop her from making a difference, as she puts her foot down and snaps in a maiden mode to show the others she's more than capable of protecting herself, while guiding RWBY's group to the military base. And I'm not gonna lie, seeing Penny this serious and unwilling to change her mind is quite the striking image that I rather like. I also want to point out how much I love the way this whole scene was directed. It's packed to the brim with a lot of dialogue and moments of drawn out reactions, and we've seen in the past how scenes of this nature can grow tedious, resulting in a decrease of the viewer's immersion. But the pacing is sharp, the limited instrumentation and dim lighting keeps you attached to the sullen moods of the cast, and the scene is interjected with shots from later on when both teams are about to start their missions, sometimes even snapping back to the bar scene with perfect match cuts, a detail that I absolutely loved. Those transitions alone really help the pacing of this entire sequence stay smooth and focused, serving as a neat way to explore all the emotions that have to be touched on now, whilst not having the dialogue compensate for it by dragging out the scene any longer. just to make sure that we the viewer understand stuff being brought up here will weigh on the cast's minds going ahead. And so we have our two teams, Team JOYR or Joyride and Team RSBNP, or I don't know, Team Raspberry Schnapps? Either way, they've all got their tasks, and we're gonna see most of that I'm sure next episode. Though I will say, I have my worries about us already having the group split up so soon, when we don't know how long it's gonna be until they're all back together again. I say this because there's a lot of personal conversations that still need to happen, but those involved are separated right now, like Ren and Nora, Yang and RWBY, and Yang and Blake. Hopefully it's not too long till we get these discussions, and aside from my concern, it is good to see some unique team mashups so it's not just the usual duos, or Team RWBY and Team Juniper 2.0. We also hear that Pietro and Maria, they were going to be headed up to Amity Tower, and they'll finish making it ready for launch where they can, which again has me having some worried feelings, since Ironwood may have some plans in mind if the heroes were going to go for the tower themselves, and even if they do launch it, how long until Ironwood is able to turn it off on his end and track them down from the base? But for now, RWBY's team need to find another way to Atlas, and before she's cut off, Weiss seems to have an idea. Calling it now, it's gonna be Klein. He's the only other person that Weiss would know personally who may not be in Atlas at the moment, since he got fired by Jacques, so perhaps the ex-butler can give them a lift. The interruption though is from Ironwood calling Penny, and against better judgment, she does actually answer it. The general expressing concern for her safety and wants to know where she is so she can get a lift back to Atlas before Salem strikes. A bit weird to say you're worried about Penny's safety, James, when you're happy to have her face plastered on a fugitive poster. But sure, despite his rather emotionless tone, maybe he is genuinely worried for her. At the same time though, I also wouldn't put it past James to just want her back simply because of her fighting abilities, not out of concern for Penny herself, especially if he is aware she has the maiden power. Thankfully, RWBY is there to tell Ironwood where he can stick his concern, at least until he changes his mind about abandoning Mantle. Fat chance, because Ironwood just immediately gets steamed again, callously laughing off the kids still thinking about Mantle, and even going so far as to say that if they don't turn themselves in, then should Salem break through the hard-light dust shields of the city, everything that follows will be their fault. Guilt tripping, because if in doubt, use guilt to get others to agree with you. Blech. If Penny wasn't already caught up in a mental storm of what to do, she surely is now, and I fear what will happen because of this. She's so vulnerable right now, and if it all becomes too much, it's quite possible that she will try something that's bound to fail, like go back to Ironwood, or again try and bargain with Salem in some desperate plea to keep the kingdom safe. Hopefully RWBY and the others will be able to help her out, but it's not a pleasant time right now for Miss Polendina. We keep this sorrowful speedwagon rolling along, as next we see the remaining Aesops dealing with the death of their leader Clover, Marrow looking the most saddened by the loss, while Harriet looks absolutely fuming, perhaps a combination of Clover's death and the sting of losing to Team RWBY still on her mind. I do want to pause things though and talk about another prevailing theory that's going on right now, that being the possibility of Clover being brought back from the dead, either via some Atlas tech, a Grimm, or from the staff of creation. Personally, while I am still sad that Clover's dead, I don't want him to come back, simply because I always prefer it when the story makes a point that death is final. There's no coming back, unless the major return is a big part of the story, or there's a precedent for it. It's the same reason why, even though I wish she was still around, I don't want Pyrrha to be reborn, cause her death meant something to the plot and several characters, much like Clover's will I'm sure for the Aesops, Ironwood, and especially Crow. As the general gets informed that Crow and Robin are in jail, and can't wait to see that interrogation scene go down, we see Ironwood has also gone and completely removed his damaged arm after the fight with Watts, replacing it with a prosthetic one. I repeat, the guy had his arm amputated and replaced with a new metal arm all within a few hours of it getting hurt, and Ironwood is already back commanding his troops. Now that is some insane levels of fortitude and willingness to remove anything that can be seen as a weakness in the eyes of the enemy. And he's not the only one in need of some upgrades, as the still recovering Winter is seen getting treatment for her damaged arms, one of them already covered in a metallic cast, and the other one most likely needing the same, since she can't even clench her hand without wincing. Now here's a question for you all. What's the better hairstyle for Winter? Hair up, hair down, or ponytail? Like I said in my opening analysis, I actually like this look a lot, as it's a style more suited for combat than looking professional, but you can let me know what you think in the comments down below. Hair queries aside, I am also curious, what has Winter told Ironwood about what went down in Freya's room? She's remained loyal enough to James to stand by him, but did she tell him about Penny getting the power, or did she lie to further help the others after giving them a head start? Winter's very much the person that Ironwood trusts the most right now, but she's also conflicted between staying by his side and joining her sister in acting on her own feelings. And considering everything that's about to happen, there's some reasons to be concerned. See, Sleet and Camilla arrive to question Ironwood for his actions and why he's enabling martial law, and the general responds and proves to Winter just how far he's willing to go to protect the kingdom by shooting Sleet with no fuss in cold blood. Holy shite. I mean, there's kicking off the volume with a bang, and then there's literally killing off someone with a bang who isn't a fighter and was only demanding for an explanation, and then just walk away from it the moment that it acts as a firm warning for everyone else present in what will happen if you don't comply. Do process my arse, rename those guns Process of Elimination. Suffice to say, Ironwood has indeed become very much like Salem, his heart closed off to his humanity, willing to sacrifice anyone and anything for victory. He could have easily just threatened to shoot Sleet or have the two councilmen arrested, but nope, he didn't go into it with any other intention but to kill. Though, as shocking as that was, I do love how, for lack of a better term, this scene was shot. There's the little things like how he has a small turn of his head to Camilla to act as a small visual threat without saying a single word to her. There's also the strings in the background echoing its notes after the gunfire to sell the shock of all present as it hangs in the air, as well as the camera blocking out the actual kill shot so it actually senses it, but it also keeps our focus on the terrifying act that Ironwood just did. It's a powerful moment that gets all the right trimmings to further make the impact land as heavy and chilling as it should be. And now more than ever, I fear that Ironwood has gone beyond the point of any kind of redemption. As you'd expect, there's a lot of shocked reactions from those present, most notably the Aesops and Winter. This wasn't just a warning to Camilla, it's a warning to them too, in not siding against him. And as the general departs, there's a big focus on Harriet and Winter, as the hair-based girl turns away when she sees Winter is looking at her, and she spots her concerned look. Harriet may have been one of the more vocal members of the group in accepting having to follow the general's orders to abandon Mantle, even if she didn't really agree with it, but this surely has even her wondering if this is the right thing to do. At the same time though, her looking away might also be her trying to turn a blind eye to it and deny even being seen as looking conflicted, so she can at least still remain, alive. And again, I raise concerns about Winter's safety too. How will she react to what just transpired? maybe this might also be a sign that she'll try and think of other ways to help the others just by standing by his side and maybe giving some early warnings. There's a lot of ways that this can go for Winter, and honestly, it just says a lot about the situation right now that the most dangerous person in this entire volume at the moment isn't any of the bad guys, or even Salem. Oh, and speaking of the actual bad guys, Salem closes off the episode with calling forth the blind bloodhound-like Grim that we've seen in the previews to smell out the one who could help her call forth Jin, so she can ask her questions. Said it before, it has to be in regards to where the crown of choice is, and it's clear as well that Oscar is her target, which means some bad news for the farm boy, and Salem's ex as well. Jeez, what a heavy episode that was, huh? And overall, a remarkably top draw one at that. The most important task of any premiere episode is setting the tempo for the volume to come, not just with its overall narrative and all the smaller plots that it establishes, but also in how it builds from what came before, and being a good episode by its own merits. I think this episode more than succeeded in doing that. All the scenes provided focused exploration of the current moods of the cast, mixing in some pleasing conversations as well while laying the groundwork for so many possible events and arcs to come. And even better, it shows how each side has their strengths and weaknesses before we kick off the next few conflicts. The scene in the bar made good use of pretty much every character present to touch base on their current feelings, as well as showing some of the other characters like the Happy Huntresses and what they're up to too. We got to hear what these guys are thinking about and what they feel the next best move is, and also some of the issues they have in past actions, leading to a lot of good interactions between Ruby, Penny, Ren, Nora and Yang, as well as some tasting material for what's ahead. Then with the villains, we witness how even with such a promising start to their time in Atlas, they also have areas that could be affected by some weaknesses, largely around Cinder, who is easily at her most intriguing period as a character in some time, thanks to the first sample of what should be some tense conflict of interest between her and Salem, and the long overdue insight on her past. I'm fascinated to see what lies in her future, as we finally start to dive deeper into who she is, and also how the ripple effects of her actions will affect those around her, like Neo and Emerald, elements that should hopefully provide their own promising material too. Do I even need to point out how brilliant the stuff with Ironwood was? Everything from the deep-rooted tension, supported by some good use of the score and some top-drawer voice work, to the excellent directing that built to the striking crescendo of the gunshot, it was simply fantastic, and a perfect showcase of Ironwood's dark descent that makes it very apparent any scene moving forward with James is going to be rife with suspense, tragedy, and fear. In other words, a lot of stuff to get excited for. The episode also had some beautifully designed backdrops befitting the bleak, somber moods throughout, and honestly, the only real negative that I had was the final shot with Salem, a moment that should have oozed dread, and the episode's last moment to make a viewer fear what's to come. But it didn't really land its mark, at least for me, mostly because this was such an overused moment in the promotional material. The reveal of the blind Grim and Salem wanting Oscar kidnapped should have been stuff that was first seen here, not in the closing moments of trailers. And yes, that impact may still be there for you guys if you haven't seen the trailers, but it's still the only scene from those previews that got overly explored to the point that it may have been to the detriment of the moment itself. With that said, it's time for the first batch of review awards, starting with the scene of the episode. Mostly because we all know the winner. The literal wiping of the Sleet clean that was Ironwood killing Sleet. It was shocking, it was brilliantly presented, and it sets the tone for Ironwood's state of mind moving forward. The General also has the Character of the Episode award for those same reasons, as well as all the compelling moments where you do wonder if there is still a dose of humanity still trying to break through with his interactions with Penny and Winter. That does remind the viewer what side of Ironwood may be lost for good the longer he's in this tyrannical coldness. And finally, the voice acting gold star, which I'm gonna give to Taylor McNee. Honestly, everyone was very good performance-wise, which is especially pleasing given how hard it must have been to record for this volume in particular, given, everything going on in our world. And while Jason and Jessica could have snatched this award as well, I wanted to give praise to Taylor for how well she delivered a kind of tone that's unfamiliar to Penny. A bit more toned down and conflicted from her, even with the limited amount of lines that she had. So yeah, first episode in the bag, and quite a promising start. Like I said before, it's vital that the premiere episode is entertaining by its own merits, but in large part needs to succeed at creating the foundations for the entire volume. And I think this episode managed to achieve that. We're on course for quite the emotional roller coaster ride, and that's saying a lot considering past thrill rides in this series. And if this episode is a sign of the kind of drama to come, I think we're in for a wild ride like nothing else before. But what about you guys? Were you pleased with this volume's kickoff? What's your take on some of the cracks forming in either side? And how did you react to Ironwood's actions? Let me know in the comments down below, and while you're at it, hit the subscribe and bell buttons and tick the notification box to make sure you get every video from me as they drop. And follow me on Twitter at ThatKaitoDan for more on anything to do with RWBY, updates on the channel, and more. But until next time, have a good day or good night, and peace out.